This is Kyle McCord, and you're listening to Austin, Felix, and Matt on the Devy Debate.
Welcome to the Devy Debate. All right, boys, are we ready to debate? Bruning, are you ready to go head-to-head with me?
I am.
Got to get my popcorn out here. Hold on.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
I'm Felix Sharp. I know you didn't think that we would get through this episode without mentioning the name one Zach F. Wilson.
It is first and goal. Ball spotted just inside the 10. Algier in. Wilson faked it to him and keeps it. Zach Wilson, the speed, and he dives for the end zone. Touchdown.
That's Austin Nace.
Gibbs, who is probably going to be the best pass catcher out of the three.
Down. He's down. He's going to get after it again. And look at the speed and the spark and the score from Gibbs. Just what Georgia Tech needed.
That's Matt Bruning.
G. Scott Jr. Obviously, I waxed poetic about him on the last episode, so I won't do that again here.
And it's Thomas Fields on the carry. Watch out. Justin Fields. Hello, Columbus. 51 yards.
Austin, you tweeted something, bro. You tweeted your running back ranking. Explain yourself.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Ohio State fan talking there.
Ah, shit.
That is why you come to the Devy Debate. Apologies to Kirk Herbstreit. We ran out of time. We'll get him rescheduled soon. And for Matt Bruning and Austin Nace, I'm Felix Sharp. Good night and good luck. It's 9:30 Eastern time, the only time zone with a 5-star rating. That means it's time for the Devy Debate. That's Matt Bruning. That's Kyle Francis of Devy Watch. Austin Nace is on sabbatical. And I'm Felix Sharp on an absolutely glorious version of tonight's show. What are the spring practice storylines to watch? Are we too low on South Carolina running back Kelvin Harris? And Mr. Francis answers the timeless question of Zach Wilson versus Justin Fields. But we start with Les Miles agreeing to a mutual parting of ways with the Kansas football program after several sexual harassment charges against him individually have arisen regarding his time at LSU, and Kansas also letting go of their athletic director today. Kyle, Devin Neal is a hot name in Devy circles. He's the multifaceted running back headed to Kansas. Should C2C and Devy League players be scared of Neal given the situation around Kansas?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say not necessarily. When he chose to go to Kansas, he was the type of player that he was going to fall into adverse game scripts to begin with, no matter who the offensive coordinator or the head coach is. If you're a wide receiver playing at a program that's going to have some challenges, that's a great spot to be in because you're going to be throwing the ball more. So regardless of whoever their coach was, I think that there were going to be just some, challenges in terms of the surrounding talent that he had. One good positive that I did see from this is before Les Miles was fired, they hired Mike DeBoard. And Mike DeBoard was actually the offensive coordinator at Indiana. And if you remember the 2018 season by Stevie Scott, when he was a true freshman, they just fed him over and over. So as a true freshman, Scott actually finished with 228 carries, 1,137 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 16 catches. So, I don't know if they're going to keep DeBoard with Miles going, but I think an argument can certainly be made that Neal is already their most talented skill player before he even takes a single snap on the field. So it would be logical to presume that they're going to want to build an offense around him. But I would say there is an element of risk if you choose to draft him, prior to knowing who the new staff is. I would say both of my Campus to Canton leagues and my Devy leagues, they all take place really starting in May and after that. So I think by then we'll have a lot better idea. But I definitely think it's worth reassessing whoever they choose to hire from there. I think the main thing that could hurt him, particularly from an NFL prospect standpoint, is there's a very small minority, but very vocal on Twitter that have been pining for Kansas or Vanderbilt or really any other program like that to get someone who's going to run the triple option. So if they decide to run the triple option, then I think, that hurts his value. But at the same time, if they chose to run the triple option, I think we can be pretty confident saying he's on his way out of Kansas, even though he stayed home as a hometown guy.
I was absolutely just going to say that he's going to probably transfer from there if they start running the triple option. You know, there was no chaos going on at Georgia Tech last season, but to me, it's kind of similar to Jahmyr Gibbs joining that Georgia Tech program that's kind of rebuilding from the triple option, and there's not a lot of talent around there. Devin Neal is just as versatile a player who can be used on kickoff return and in the passing game. So I wouldn't be scared off of him either. As you said, Kyle, I mean, that offense might be built around him because there's not a lot of talent there. So I agree with you, but I am interested to see who they hire. I don't remember the last time Kansas was good. I mean, in the early 2000s, I believe they had a good season. But that's a program that probably needs a program builder for whoever's going to go there, and I'm just not sure who that's going to be. Bruning, anything that you want to add before we move on?
No, not at all. I think he nailed it.
All right. We are on the precipice of spring practices starting. A lot of spring practices have already started getting going, and there are a lot of storylines that we are following. I'm going to start with this one, the Notre Dame quarterback situation. And Kyle, we'll throw it to you first. Notre Dame, you've got Jack Cohn coming in from Wisconsin. He's the tested veteran who lost his job to Graham Mertz. And you've got Tyler Buchner. I mean, I think that Tyler Buchner is a potential Lamar Jackson level athlete coming out of La Jolla, California. We had Alan True on last week, and Alan essentially said for those quarterback prospects that didn't play last season, they weren't able to earn a 5th star and improve their 24/7 recruiting ranking. And so when I look at that and say, man, I look at Tyler Buchner, and it's hard for me not to have him as the number 1 quarterback. That doesn't mean that he's going to get snaps this season at Notre Dame. Kyle, how do you see that situation playing out? Is it going to be Cohn with a mix-in of Buchner? Do you see Cohn just holding the job all year? How do you see the Notre Dame quarterback situation playing out?
I think a lot of it's really going to depend on what we see in spring ball. I'm assuming he enrolled early. I mean, it definitely would have been beneficial for him to do so. So I'm under the assumption, but I haven't verified that he did enroll early. In terms of percentage chance, you know, I think that he wins the job. I'd say I'm at 60% that he could, from the first snap of the season, get the job. I think if he gets it from the first snap, I really can't see them giving the ball back over to Cohn. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, at that point, you're just saying, hey, this is the future of our program. We're going to build around him. I don't think Cohn is terrible. Like, I think he's serviceable. If they just want to turn around and hand the ball to Kyron Williams 25 times a game, he's plenty of experience doing that at Wisconsin, so he can handle that. But yeah, I tend to think if he played this past year and he had that extra year of experience, because he also came off an injury prior to that in 2018 where he tore his ACL. Right. He just is so inexperienced, but I would say he probably has the best likelihood of any true freshman to take that job. So I would lean that way, but we'll know more after spring, I think.
Confirming that Tyler Buchner is an early enrollee, so he's going to be going through spring practice. Is there a dark horse there? I mean, I feel like there's, is there anybody that we should be watching for that can come out of the woodwork there at Notre Dame?
I don't think so. I think they got Drew Pine or some guy like that last year, and I mean, he got into Notre Dame, so he's a capable quarterback. But I think it's his program moving forward. It's just a matter of time before they decide to give it to them. I imagine with some of what Notre Dame lost this past year, they're probably not thinking, hey, we're set up for another title run. So again, I think it would be logical to just go ahead and give him the keys and let him get it sorted out.
Bruning, all of the Campus to Canton guys are relatively high on Tyler Buchner. For anyone who hasn't watched him, it's been a while since he's played football, actually. What's your take on the type of prospect that Tyler Buchner is?
I mean, I agree with you. I don't remember where I have them, and of course, you have to throw that to me without me knowing that, so I can't pull up my rankings and see where I have him.
I'm pretty sure I have him at 11. I think I have him just outside the top 10 at 11. He's my highest ranked freshman quarterback. After that, I have Brock Vandegrift in third. The Washington quarterback, Sam Heward. So, but just as a group, the Campus to Canton guys are very high on Tyler Buchner because of his rushing ability. He ran for 1,600 yards as a junior. 1,600 yards. I don't care what level of competition you're playing at. It's just a very impressive figure for a quarterback.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I like him. The biggest thing is, and we talked about this a little bit in our QB ranking summit, it's hard to rank some of these guys, the freshmen. I don't know how Kyle feels about this. And just watching like the huddle videos, like I was talking about when I was watching some of the Kyle McCord stuff, and you're watching stuff that's like shot on someone's cell phone. Like it's hard to tell how good some of this stuff really is. I do think he needs to improve some on his passing. My biggest fear with that, and what I hope that they do what Kyle was saying, and I feel like Austin, and he's going to join us for the after show. We've talked about this a little bit. We just think that Kelly seems to lean more into those veterans, and we're worried that he's just going to give Cohen the job, even if Buchner looks better in spring practices. Which I agree with you. I think it should just be him from the start. But that's what worries me is they bring Cohen in, and it's like, well, you know what? We trust you. You're a veteran. Because I don't know why. I agree with you. I don't think they have a shot to really run for a title this year. I don't know if Kelly maybe thinks that. I think thinks bringing in Cohen, he still has a shot to go for a title. So that'd be my biggest fear in having Buchner.
Let's go to the SEC in another position. That's running back. The South Carolina running back situation. You've got Kelvin Harris, who kind of came out of nowhere last year. Everyone was very high on Marshawn Lloyd. And going through the Devy Watch for 2021, the Devy Watch team is really high on Kelvin Harris. Kyle, I mean, you guys have him in your second tier, just below some of the elite guys, but isn't he a two-down plotter?
I don't think so, and here's why I don't see it that way. He's the leading returning rusher in the SEC, which I think should just mean something in and of itself, and he caught 20 balls last season. So I think he showed he can be at least a serviceable pass catcher at a minimum. And in terms of him being a plotter, he may seem it because of his build, but when he was a teenager, he ran a verified 4.55 40, 4.26 short shuttle, and he jumped 35 inches in the vert as a 225-pound high schooler. So those are pretty impressive numbers for a high school player. I mean, I'd go as far as to say extremely impressive. And just for perspective, again, I'm going to say his numbers again: 4.55, 4.26, 35 inches in the vertical at 225 pounds. Bijan Robinson, as a high school player, at 200 pounds, ran a 4.77, 4.56 short shuttle and jumped 37 inches. And he weighed 25 pounds less than Harris. So I think in terms of athleticism, if we can assume that Harris is going to at least maintain or potentially even build on it in a strength program, I just don't see him in that way. I think sometimes he's a bit deceiving in terms of how he looks. But the reality is Nick Chubb, who we all know was just an elite athlete entering college, his athletic profile is actually closer to Nick Chubb's than it was Bijan Robinson's. And so, again, a lot can fluctuate from there. So it's not always an apples to apples thing, but some other things to kind of back up Harris. He ranked 7th nationally this past season in 20 plus yard runs. Each guy ranked ahead of him had at least one more game than him. He had 11 20 plus yard runs. So for perspective, for the big three this year, Javonte Williams had 14, Najee Harris had 8, Travis Etienne had 7. So he had more 20-yard runs than both Harris and Etienne this season. He was 3rd nationally in 30-yard runs. He was 2nd nationally in 40-yard runs, and he was one of only 16 running backs across the nation that had an 80-plus yard run. So I just wouldn't necessarily agree that that's all he is. And the other thing is, and it's a fair thing to ask, it's a fair question, but a lot of those same things were said about A.J. Dillon as well. And we kind of all know now, as we're recording this, A.J. Dillon's now the hottest name in Dynasty because he could step into that big role. So he may not be the pass catcher of a DeAndre Swift, but he's got 20 catches on his resume. And so for me, I guess just to speak about something philosophically before we move on, I'm more of a film guy than I am analytics, but one thing I've done a little bit of modeling and just started playing around with things. And so if I'm just looking at a high level of what am I looking for in a running back, I'm seeing if they check these boxes. Do they weigh at least 205 pounds? Yes, he does. Does he play at a Power 5 school? Yes, he does. Does he have a 20 catch season? Yes, he does. Does he have a 1,000-yard rushing season? Yes, he does. And so he achieved all those as an underclassman. So again, that's a very oversimplified way to evaluate a running back. I know that it's not that simple, but from some of those, I guess you would call that an analytical perspective. He profiles really closely to the guys that we've seen in the past 2 years in the NFL put up RB1 or RB2 numbers. So I think those are some of the reasons why we really liked him.
You've got a Marion Brown going there to potentially stretch the defense. If Luke Doty can develop, and then Bruning, you've got Marshawn Lloyd coming back to share touches with Kevin Harris. Talk to me a little bit about Marshawn Lloyd and what we can expect from him after he tore his ACL last year and is coming back, hopefully healthy this season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he looked good last year before the ACL tear, and I just don't know how they give him the job back, though, after what Harris did. I could see it being some kind of time split or them splitting carries and Harris getting the majority of them. I think the one thing that works for Lloyd is with Harris being a junior, he can still come back next year and be the lead running back for the Gamecocks. What's going to be interesting is obviously with the transfer portal rules, does he just decide to transfer? But I guess there's probably a lot of schools that could use a running back like him. But coming off the injury, I just think it'd be smarter for him to stay there with the Gamecocks, maybe get worked in a little bit those first couple games, let Harris be the lead back, and then start working into that time split, and then just take over the backfield next year and dominate the way he did in those first couple games before he got hurt.
Kyle, a lot of folks in Devy circles are high on Marshawn Lloyd. How do you see his role playing out there at South Carolina? Do you see him? Is it just going to be a dynamic backfield there?
I would think so. It's a little bit hard to forecast them because a big component of what I do from a college fantasy standpoint is I go through and look at whenever there's been a coaching change, which we just had a coaching change at South Carolina. And so Marcus Satterfield is the new offensive coordinator. And when I read that name, I'm like, is he related to the Satterfield up at Louisville? And it doesn't look like he is. But I go back through and I look at the previous seasons of these offensive coordinators. What did their offenses look like? What was the distribution? Did they want a bell cow? Did they divvy things up? And unfortunately, the majority of his experience comes over a decade ago as an offensive coordinator, and majority at an FCS level, which I've found doesn't always translate to the FBS. So I don't know that we have enough data to say definitively how he's going to split things up, but I think from a talent standpoint, I mean, you've got two of the most talented backs in the conference. So I don't think that Harris will probably match the numbers he did this year just because they have another reliable option in Lloyd. And I think Lloyd's just an incredible talent as well. I was super high on him last year. And a lot of that had to do with, I thought he was stepping into this role and it probably would have been his. And so that's the other thing. The challenge with a guy like Kevin Harris is he may be this guy that I believe or others believe is this talented, but it took a little bit of luck or bad luck if you're Marshawn Lloyd for us really to know. So I'm a little bit wait and see there, but I think both of them could see an increase in their stock. And I think Harris will probably cash in. He should cash in after this year, kind of no matter what he does, and go to the league in a weak class.
Now, one of my favorite training camp storylines to track is the Alabama receiver position this spring. It just so happens that my favorite freshman player is not there in training camp. Obviously, we're talking about Ja'Cory Brooks, a guy Hall, Christian Leary, and JoJo Earl. JoJo Earl, because he played in a championship game late this year, was not eligible to enroll early. So we're going to have to wait for the summer, at least for him to go down to Alabama. Kyle, you tweeted earlier last week or this week, just how the true freshman wide receivers have fared at Alabama recently. We had Jalen Waddle's season of 45 catches, 848 yards, his true freshman season. After that, you're talking about Jerry Jeudy with 14 for 264 and 2. Should we pour cold water on our expectations for these Alabama receivers? These freshman receivers.
I would say, just again, philosophically, I almost always pour water on any incoming freshman receiver. It's a harder position to translate right away. I think you just can't rely on, running go routes and catching some screens and just being the most athletic guy on the field like a lot of these premier guys are at wide receiver. It's another thing that makes them tough to evaluate out of high school. I mean, very few of them are running full route trees, and they're just already the bigger, more dominant, faster receiver, and so they're just running away from guys with ease. So I would say both. Yes, specifically, I don't have high expectations for Alabama's talented quartet that they brought on, and especially in this setting, even though Alabama's room isn't as impressive as it's been in a lot of those other years where we had the depressed production. I just don't think that we're going to see a breakout season for any of these guys. So maybe they would have been smart to take the Rondale Moore career path and go to a smaller school where they could step on the field day one, or maybe they feel like, hey, we're willing to wait our turn because the NFL has shown they don't care about breakout age at Alabama as much as maybe some of the more analytically minded fantasy owners are. So yeah, I would say we need to pour some cold water on them for now.
Well, Bruning, I want to push back on Kyle here because we've got, I see Slade Bolden, I see Javon Baker, who didn't play last year, and I see John Mechie, and then Billingsley. I don't see a lot in that wide receiver room after that. Who do you think is going to lead Alabama in receptions this year, and what's just your feel on the freshman wide receivers?
I mean, I still think it's probably going to be Mechie who leads them, and I'm going to give a little bit of credit here to our other co-host who wasn't able to make it here today in Austin, because I heard him and Colin talking about it on their podcast, Campus to Canton, that they think it's going to be one of either Ja'Cory Brooks or and Kyle. How do you? I'm horrible with pronouncing names. Is it a Guy Hall? I don't know how to say his
I just call him Hall. I don't even try.
We're just going to roll with Hall because I don't. I'm horrible with names. Not quite as bad as our good friend Alfred, but I'm not very good at pronouncing names either. So I agree with them that I think one of those guys is probably going to step up. They both, I think, are going to play the same role. That's right, Austin. You guys, they talked about it. I think both of them play or likely will play the same role for Alabama. So I think one of them steps up. Now, will they have that breakout year? I don't think so, but I think one of those guys is going to get on the field, and I think it's going to come down to Brooks or Hall. I am a little bit higher on Brooks, and I think some people are. I know a lot of people like Hall, and I think Leary is kind of the two guys, and Earl. I know you're big on Earl, Felix. Those seem to be the three. Maybe most have them above Brooks, but I really like Brooks, so I would like to see him take that step, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's Hall.
Well, Hall is extremely physical. You have to love that. I wish JoJo Earl was there. He's not, but I think that he is the easiest player to scheme for. You can use him on jet sweeps. You could just put him in the backfield and give him the damn ball and let him run it. You can just tell him run goes. You can have him return punts and kicks. I still have Alabama being an elite offense under Bryce Young. And when I look at the players there who could kind of pop, there could be more than one. I don't think it's going to be Slade Bolden. I think it could be Billingsley, their tight end / wide receiver, Mechie, but then I have to add a third there. So if Earl was there, I would say that would be the easiest candidate for me because you can line him up in the slot, and he's just an easy player to get the ball to, bubble screens, whatever, get the ball out of Bryce Young's hands. But then you have these two kind of taller, physical X-style wide receivers in Brooks and Hall. I think they're going to score a lot of touchdowns. But I see kind of the yards going to JoJo Earl. Any objection, Kyle, to thinking that, JoJo Earl could come in even in the summer without a spring and, having a 500-yard season? Any objection to that?
Yeah, I would still object to that. And part of that is because, and I mentioned kind of philosophically how I project a lot of these players is with Bill O'Brien now being the new offensive coordinator. Most recently was the head coach with the Texans. So I went back to Penn State, which is the job that got him the job with the Texans. And I kind of looked at, okay, how did he use guys? And so what I uncovered was he had Allen Robinson for both of those years. So let's take that into account. Allen Robinson was an extremely gifted college wide receiver. So Allen Robinson in his first season with O'Brien had 77 catches, 1,018 yards, 11 touchdowns. Then the next season, he had 97 catches, 1,432 yards, and 6 touchdowns. So he was the guy that had the dominant market share for them. But then when you looked at how O'Brien deployed the rest of his talent, he had tight ends combined for 78 catches in 2012 and 58 catches in 2013. His wide receiver 2 actually never exceeded 31 catches in a single season. Now, again, I'm not saying it's necessarily going to be apples to apples, because I do think Saban hired him to run the version of the Alabama offense that has been so dominant in this recent run that kind of Lane Kiffin sparked, and now we've seen have its own iterations from here. But I just don't think it's going to be a freshman. I actually really like Slade Bolden as well. I don't think any of those guys are going to take snaps away from Slade Bolden, and I know that that's probably sounds pretty controversial. I'm not saying that all of those guys may not have a brighter NFL future, but I actually believe Slade Bolden's going to play in the NFL. I think he's got a skill set that's extremely comparable to JoJo Earls as well, where, he was an all-purpose back, and he could play running back at a lot of schools. He actually got on the field as a true freshman running the Wildcat. He's thrown for a touchdown out of the Wildcat. They had him run out of the Wildcat. So he's a guy that can do a lot of things. And if you hear the way his teammates and Saban speak about him, I'm not willing to cede that he's going to give up ground this year. So I think that there's a chance they all could get some snaps, but I probably like Bolden more than anybody else I've talked to. And as an Alabama fan myself, I actually would prefer to see Bolden on the field for the majority of snaps than one of the freshmen. But if it's going to be someone, I'm with you. I want it to be Earl.
Well, it's interesting because I don't think that there's Bolden and Earl present a unique skill set to play that slot receiver, kind of do the shifty stuff. And I want to make this comparison. Let's just say for both of them. With the Houston Texans, when Kiki Kuti was finally healthy as a rookie, in his first game, he got 15 targets, 11 receptions for 109 yards, and they were scheming for him for this 5th-round draft pick to get the ball into his hands. And I think that that's how we could see either Earl or Bolden, whomever, used at Alabama. Slade Bolden is like essentially not being drafted in 45-round campus to Canton league. So you've heard it from Mr. Franchise here. You need to pay attention to Slade Bolden. Kyle, obviously we've got you here because we want to talk about the Devy Watch. And I just want to give you a second to talk about the 2021 version. I've got to go through this 350-page publications with rankings, with advanced statistics, with written profiles. It's my first time being able to digest it. I was a first-time purchaser this year. Talk to us a little bit about the 2021 version of the Devy Watch. And, was there a take or a player or a ranking that you felt specifically strong about with this year's version?
Yeah, well, I think this is our 5th year putting things together, our 2nd time doing it kind of as our own entity with our own site. So I think we got some aesthetic upgrades from that standpoint, which, isn't mandatory. I would rather have high quality content than great looking visuals. At the end of the day, you can pull all the spice out of a soup and you're left with water, but water is what you need to survive. So we want to make sure that there's actually the content is there. But I will say I've been really proud of Brad, both our editor and our graphics guy. I think he's been able to do both. So just kudos to him. Just wanted to shout him out for all of his work that he does and holding us together and doing everything he does. But yeah, so we've got a team of 6 guys. And so, the way that we've structured the Devy Watch is, and I think we've done this for either 2 or 3 years running now, is we've assigned primary evaluators to certain conferences in college football. Like, for example, I'm assigned to the SEC West, the Mountain West Mountain Division, Independence, and I think that's it. But anyway, so the nice thing about us breaking things up and looking at players that way is you get to have eyes on the same player for multiple years. And I think that that's really helpful. You can find, hey, did this player improve? Did they take a step back? Do I still have those same concerns? Did I see something that I thought I was seeing that I actually didn't? And so I think the consistency factor in terms of something that we've done has been really beneficial for us. But yeah, we just go through and we break down pretty much the entirety of college football. And we don't cover campus to Canton specifically, but we also kind of cater to other folks who play that. And that's been something that we did in the guide this year is I kind of encourage the team. It said, hey, let's be clear within our words that we're using in these profiles that we're writing. If we think that they're a great, value in campus to Canton, and I'll just give you an example of a guy like that, a guy like George Halani at Boise State. Probably not going to be, like, I can't say emphatically he's going to be a day 2 pick in the NFL. But we also wouldn't have necessarily known that about Alexander Madison, and he ended up being a day 2 pick in the NFL. And while he's sitting behind Dalvin Cook, he was a guy that was a massive producer in college, and then he grew into an asset in the NFL. And that's kind of the name of the game in fantasy and dynasty and campus to Canton. I mean, not every player has to grow into being Saquon Barkley, but if they can be the guy where you're going after an elite player and you're saying, hey, I'll throw in Alexander Madison, that may get a deal done. And so players that have the ability to be mega producers on the college side and could surprise you and kind of be the icing on the cake on the NFL side of things, we wanted to kind of call out some of those players as well. So that's kind of the overview in terms of what we did. And we try to cater some of it towards college fantasy, the majority of it towards Devy, but then also campus to Canton as well.
Go ahead and get yourself a copy of the 2021 Devy Watch. I mean, just go get it. I've got it. I'm going to continue to get it every year after this. All right, gentlemen. We brought Mr. Franchise here for this. Are we ready for the Devy debates?
Absolutely.
Ready to roll.
We might not even have disagreement here because Austin's not here. The first question. You cover the Mountain West, Kyle, so we'll give this to you, and then I'll throw it to Bruning. True or false? Carson Strong is a first-round pick in 2022.
I'm gonna say false. I'm gonna say he gets drafted in the Drew Lock, Jalen Hurts range. So a top 60 pick. I'm not quite ready to go first round.
I mean, you know where I sit on this. I'm going to say true. I think if he continues to, I think he's improved every single year. If he improves this year as well, I do think he's obviously going to put up a bunch of stats. Being there with Nevada, I think he could sneak into someone trading up, not a la Lamar Jackson, because obviously Lamar Jackson, I think athletically is a little bit better than him, but maybe a team trades up into the back end of the first round because they want that 5th year option on him, and they take him after him having another great year.
I'm going to say true also. And in looking at the Devy Watch this year, the Devy Watch guys are very high on Carson Strong, higher on Strong than Keaton Slovis, higher on Strong than Jaden Daniels. Kyle, just talk to me about. I mean, you cover the Mountain West. Talk to me what you see in him as a player.
Yeah. The one thing I will say, he's in the opposite. I forget what the other division of the Mountain West is. So I wasn't the primary on him. I'm on the Boise side of things. He's on the other side of things. But I think the things that I like about him is he's a pure pocket passer, and I'm not saying I necessarily like that about him because from a fantasy standpoint, I would always prefer a guy that can run. But if you're going to be a pocket passer, he's got the arm to get himself out of trouble. He's got an NFL arm without question. He's gonna be productive again. That offense is gonna continue to be one of the highest volume passing offenses, and now they've shown that they want to run it as well. But he's going to be a really high producer, and so if I'm looking at a player that's either at an FCS school or a Group of 5 school, if I'm going to even remotely consider them to be a potential first round prospect, they have to be among the most productive quarterbacks across the country. So I think he's going to have that production on his side. He's not a guy that I've really dove extremely deep into in terms of knowing all of his intricacies. I just think that he's a guy that he's got the NFL size that I think a lot of franchises are still going to look for. Some have shown they're willing to get away from that archetype, but I think that there's going to be a lot of franchises that like his size. He's got the arm, and he's going to be really productive. So I think those are all things that work in his favor.
All right, let's move on here. Taking a look at the Devy Watch, very high on Jerrion Ealy. A smaller running back at Ole Miss who has kind of flirted with baseball, is actually drafted. Bruni, I'm going to throw this to you first. Should fantasy gamers be concerned with Jerrion Ealy's size and his flirtation with baseball?
I don't think so. I think so. I was looking at my rankings just to kind of get an idea of where I had him. So I'm second highest in our group. Alfred is about 10 spots or 8 spots higher than me. Or no, I'm sorry, Colin. Colin is 8 spots higher than me. Obviously, his size is a concern, but he's so elusive and explosive. He's got that receiving part of his game, which I think can translate to the NFL if he goes into the NFL. I believe, and I could be wrong on this, but I thought earlier this offseason he came out and said he's not focusing on baseball this year. So if he's willing to do that for his junior year, I don't see why that would be. Clearly, if he's focusing on football, I think that means he wants to have a future in the NFL. And I think that there is a place for a back like him at the NFL level, especially on the receiving side. Do I think he's going to be a workhorse? No, but I think he can produce for you on the college side of things this year and be somewhat productive at the NFL level just because of his speed, elusiveness, and his receiving ability.
Kyle, in looking at your write-up, I mean, you kind of highlighted these things about his baseball and his size. I would have suggested, I mean, you guys have him at RB9 in tier 2. I would have assumed that based on your write-up that maybe you would have him lower ranked on based on that risk. I mean, he's kind of an outlier as a player at 208 pounds, 5'8", or something like that. Do you think that C2Cers and Devy leaguers should be concerned with his size and his flirtation with baseball?
I do, and that's part of kind of going back into the way that my team is set up. Is we have 6 guys on the team. And so just because I'm the primary scout on a guy, if there are 3, 4, 5 other guys that feel I'm wrong and that's not a concern, then I have the liberty, and I would even go as far as to say the responsibility, to give an assessment of his risks and everything like that, and then let the reader decide. But I would vehemently disagree with our ranking of him, to be honest with you. And let me ask you guys, this is going to be, if either of you guys get this right, I'll Venmo you $20 on the spot. Okay. so here's the question. Who was the last sub 200-pound back to be drafted on day 1 or day 2 of the NFL draft?
Day 1 or day 2? Is it LaShawn McCoy?
Nope.
Yeah, I've got no idea.
It's Dry Archer in 2014.
Dry Archer.
Wow.
Dry.
Okay.
So think about that. Ealy's right now listed. He came into school listed at 5'9", 180. Then he was 5'9", 180 as a sophomore. And now he's 5'8", so he lost an inch, 190. So his third year in the program, he's at 190. So 3 years, he's put on 10 pounds. He still has 10 more to go to be even in a bucket where he could be remotely considered a viable NFL asset. And I'll just tell you how I break things down. I really don't even care how good a guy is in the NFL, to be honest with you, when I'm evaluating from a Devy standpoint. Truly, the only thing I care about is if they're a quarterback, are they going to be drafted in the top 50 of the NFL draft and have an opportunity to be a franchise guy? If they're a wide receiver and a running back, are they going to be drafted in rounds 1 through 3 of the NFL draft? Anything else aside from that, in my opinion, is a miss as an evaluator. If I have a guy and especially I'm asking someone to use a premium pick on them in a Devy league and they're drafted in day 4 and they go on to be a Hall of Famer, I'm still going to say that's a miss from my standpoint, because the hit rate in terms of actual production, viable running back 1, running back 2 fantasy seasons in the NFL falls off a cliff after day 3. I mean, it happens some. You see outliers that happen, but I'm not willing to bet on an outlier, especially if it's going to cost me a premium pick. Now, if he's the the price of Sincere McCormick and you can get him in the 8th, 9th, 10th round, by all means, have a shot at it. But for me, I'm just not willing to bet on someone that is going to be a significant historical outlier, almost unprecedented, I would go as far as to saying. And the last thing I would say about baseball is I've sort of half-heartedly gone back and tried to verify this, but I was watching them live in 2018, and it was kind of a lull in the game, and the commentators were kind of starting to talk about some of their meetings with the Ole Miss staff and the Ole Miss players. And I was not fully engaged, but I was kind of watching, and I heard them say something. And again, I haven't been able to verify this, but I can say it with 90% certainty. This is what I heard. I believe one of the announcers said in their meeting with Jerry and Ely, he actually expressed he doesn't have a desire to play in the NFL, that he wants to play Major League Baseball. So that is just always something that stuck with me. Unfortunately, it happened in the middle of a broadcast where I don't know, and I'm not going to go back and watch, 12 full games at 3 hours a pop and try to find out where these guys are talking about it. Now, I think that's unlikely, but you add that on top of the size. And for me, I would go as far as to say in the Devy Watch's rankings, he would be probably the number one fade for me at the rankings that we had.
I want to take a small detour. We're talking about small, undersized players. You cover the Mountain West Mountain Division. Dante Wright is somebody that we are very high on at Colorado State, played with Warren Jackson. That's actually how he kind of popped watching Warren Jackson. He kind of popped his freshman year. People on the East Coast, they don't see these games that start at 10 p.m. Eastern time. And, Lord knows if they're watching a Mountain West game. Is Dante Wright someone who is going to be drafted in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft? Are you as high on him as we are at Campus to Canton?
I think he's great for y'all's format. In the Campus to Canton format, he would fall exactly into that scenario that I mentioned with George Holani. If you said, Kyle, I'll give you even odds right now, $100 on the line, is he going to be drafted within day 2? I would say no, probably not. Does he have an opportunity to? Yes. I think that his production profile is going to be really impressive. So you're going to have a lot of the analytics folks that really like him from a production standpoint. And how about these numbers? So in high school, he was really small in high school. He was listed at 5'10" and 165 pounds. So keep in mind he's small here, but let me throw out these verified numbers. 4.43 40, 3.91 short shuttle, 3.91. I mean, that's got to be top. If he did that in the NFL, he'd be top 5% all time in the short shuttle. Jumped 37.5 inches in the vertical. The good news is he's up to 5'9", 180. So he's roughly, he's not far off from Jalen Waddle size. And so I think he's a guy would be a tremendous gamble to take in Campus to Canton, because you're going to have a lot of folks that are still wanting to draft some of the high-profile freshmen that you're going to have to wait for them to produce for several years. I don't even consider guys like that in Campus to Canton. They're not even in my queue. I'm targeting guys like this because I'm more concerned about the college side, especially if there is a reasonable path forward when they can make it to the NFL. So I would say unlikely he gets enough money enough investment to be relevant, but I also wouldn't totally rule him out.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kyle Francis is a professional. We did not have Dante Wright on the show sheet, and he just pulled those his verified statistics out, his verified measurables out extremely quickly. All right, Bruning, I want to hear from you, because this is one of my favorite storylines, the Texas quarterback situation. I'm somewhat infatuated with Casey Thompson after the Alamo Bowl, and just looking after that, looking what he was as a high school prospect and what he did at the spring game in 2018, going against Sam Ehlinger. True or false, Hudson Card will be the 2021 starter for Texas in the first week for the Texas Longhorns. True or false?
Well, you already know where I stand with this, and I believe that's true. I'm not as big on Casey Thompson as you are. I think Hudson Card's got all of the intangibles to be a really good quarterback. I like his athleticism. I like his accuracy when he throws the ball. I think I want to say it was Austin or Colin that mentioned this. There was an interview given by Steve Sarkisian when he was talking about wanting to come to Texas, talking up Bijan Robinson. I know you're going to roll your eyes, but it matters. He said that he wouldn't have chose Texas if they didn't have a quarterback, and I don't believe he was talking about Casey Thompson. I believe he was talking about Hudson Card. So, yes, I think come day one, he's going to be the starter. I think he's got more upside than Casey Thompson, and Sark wants to go in there and win. I don't think he's with the Texas boosters. They're not looking for him to come in there year one and go 9-3 or something like that. They want him to win. They want to beat Oklahoma. They want to be the champion. So I'm all in on Hudson Card.
That's a reference to an article in The Athletic where some of the coaches who had been fired went on the record, but were anonymous and said, essentially that Hudson Card was the best thing since sliced bread. I like Hudson Card too. I've called him Bryce Young Light, but I mean, Kyle, back me up on this. I mean, Casey Thompson's got a shot to take and keep that job. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I can't back you on this one, Felix. My apologies. I think that that article was pretty telling. The other part of that was interesting, and you guys are writers, so you understand, and you've interviewed people. When you're disseminating an interview, you unless you're saying this is the exact transcript, you don't always have the full context. I will say, though, in a portion of that article, because I read it as well, when he mentioned quarterback, the only name that Sarkisian mentioned was Card. So I think based on that and the offense that he wants to run, I just can't see a way that it's not Card, especially because Card is a guy that, at Lake Travis, he was a wide receiver until his freshman and sophomore year. So he didn't start playing quarterback full-time until he was a junior. And so I think there's definitely some things he needs to get worked out. I mean, both guys are incredible athletes. I mean, I may go as far as to say those are the two, if you're looking in terms of a duo, the most athletic quarterback duo on one team at quarterback in the country. But I just don't think that Thompson has the passing ability that Card does, and knowing what Sark wants to run, and also maybe getting away some of the quarterback heavy run game that we just saw with Herman and Ellinger that a lot of the boosters soured on. I also think there may be some pressure, as Matt alluded to, from the boosters of, hey, let's go with a guy like Card. So I'd love to back you here, but I'm a Card guy as well. He's a favorite of mine.
Listen, I need some help from somebody out there on Casey Thompson Island. Like I am stranded alone by myself on Casey Thompson Island. You've got a few more. Looking at the Devy Watch again, Sean Tucker. You guys have him as the 27th. I thought it was like is this a typo? As the 27th ranked running back of the 2023 class, and he has the 4th highest dominator rating. Again, I'm getting all of these statistics from the Devy Watch. What's up with his rating? Why are the Devy Watch guys so low on him?
I think we probably screwed that one up, to be honest. I don't think that I could rate 27 players above him. I will just also say, like, in the spirit of full disclosure, in terms of how we rank things, like our most serious conversations center around the first 6 tiers. Now, 5 tiers comprise our top 100 players, and then essentially you can get through a portion of tier 6. And those are the guys that we're essentially recommending if you're entering a Devy startup, and that's typically going to be 10 rounds if you play with a bunch of degenerates, which I know most of us do. You're going to have 10 rounds to start up. Hey, here are the guys to really consider if you're doing a startup. So while I disagree numerically that there are, 26 or 27 backs in that class better than him, I'm also not quite ready to say, hey, I feel really confident this guy's going to be an NFL running back. He kind of had a weird trajectory. As a recruit, he weighed in at one of the testing centers. He was 5'10" and 157 pounds as a senior. And so his body went
Wow.
through an extremely significant transformation. He's a good looking, he's pretty yoked up. I think
Yeah.
Syracuse only lists him low 2s. So that's fine. I mean, that's the requisite weight we need, but he just was the kind of a guy that was nowhere on anyone's radar. The reality was he was probably running back 5 or running back 6 on the depth chart. Pandemic hits, and then they have some transfers, they have some injuries, and I think it was right after week 4, I want to say, don't quote me on that one exactly, that they started feeding him. So I think he showed some good things. I don't think we probably got his ranking right, but at the same time, it's a rather, in my opinion, an insignificant miss or a less significant miss in terms of, if you're going to screw things up, have it be down later in the rounds where I couldn't personally look someone in the face and say, hey, take Sean Tucker if you're in a 10-round startup. I'm going to need to see it for another year. But one thing I do think was impressive about him is they had just a terrible offensive line, and they were one of the worst passing offenses, and he managed to do some good things. So he's one of the few lone bright spots. Him and Taj Harris did some good things at receiver. So to answer your question, yes, I think we messed that up. And also, no, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying he's a bona fide Devy asset at this point.
Bruning, would you rate Sean Tucker? It just so happens that Sean Tucker is like one player that I forgot to rank when we released the site, and I have to see where I would put him amongst the 2023 class. But I have to believe I would have him top 10 in that class. Would you? You're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
Of course, I pull a Felix, and I'm muted as I go on there. I don't know. I was trying to pull mine up really quick because I imagine I'm probably not very high on him either.
Well, while you're pulling those up, I mean, Sean Tucker piqued I can't remember who they were playing earlier in the season, but I got to see him play. And then at the end of the season, obviously the way he played against Clemson, against that Clemson team, and he caught the ball a little bit. So we knew that he was a bowling ball, kind of a wrecking machine, but he showed a little bit in the passing game. And if we can see that, over the next season, I really like the type of player that Sean Tucker is. So, Bruning, would you rank him top 10 in the 2023 class?
2023? God, it's so hard to think of who off the top of my head now who I would even put above him. Probably. Oh my God, why does my thing keep switching to Campus to Canton? Did I mute myself again? I can't see my screen.
No, you're all right. You're all right. I'm
trying to pull up my prospect thing because it's a whole thing. I mean, I do like his elusiveness. That was the big thing I have highlighted here for him. But 2023 running backs, let me see where I have him. That way I can answer your question correctly.
I'll
your
filibuster
answer
here.
Would be no.
Oh.
The answer would be no. He doesn't. I don't even have my top 12. So that's no.
Let me add one more thing, because I think this is an important distinction to make when we're talking about valuing players. All of us are on Twitter. We know that there are two very divisive, vitriolic camps when it comes to evaluating prospects. One I'll describe as analytics, one I'll describe as film. It's important, no matter which side of the street you're on, or if you're, in my opinion, a rational, logical person, you're using all of the information. No matter which side of the street you're on, it's important to recognize that those people who you may disagree with, they comprise the market amongst all of us. All of us comprise the market of managers in fantasy leagues that are determining a player's value and their worth. And so if you have someone that maybe you don't love him on film, like let's say an argument can be made for that with Tucker. Okay, you don't love his film. That's okay. Because he did what he did as a freshman, he's going to show up on some spreadsheets. And so let's call it 40 to 50% of your potential league mates are going to have some value on him. So again, going back and taking some ownership from where we had him on the Devy Watch side of things, we ranked him too low, if for no other reason that roughly 40 to 50% of the market is going to value him more than maybe what we perceive from his film. So maybe that's a philosophical distinction, but I mean, I think that that's important to say as well, that, again, to just to take accountability for that. Yeah, I think just for those reasons alone, we probably did a disservice ranking him as low as we did within his own class.
Kyle, Austin was saying that we needed to have you on, and I'm so glad we did. I hope that, after our show today that you will come back on with us, because this is really impressive stuff. I want to go through these next questions here. It can kind of rapid fire style. Bruning, we let the folks, we let Katie and Alan and Alfred take over the show last week, so we didn't get to answer these questions ourselves. So I'm going to throw this one to you first. Give me 20 seconds. Pick one. Unmute yourself and pick one. George Pickens, David Bell, Treylon Burks, or Garrett Wilson?
You know my answer, and it's a little bit of homerism, but also because I just love Garrett Wilson. I'm going Garrett Wilson. No, I take that back. My bad. You said David Bell, didn't you? David Bell is my number one ranked wide receiver for that class. I love Bell. I think he's going to have a really good year this year without Rondale Moore there. Wilson would be a very close second, but give me Bell.
Kyle, pick one. Give me George Pickens, David Bell, Treylon Burks, or Garrett Wilson.
I'm a Burks guy.
That would be Austin's choice as well. Yeah.
I am a George Pickens guy. I think I have Treylon Burks ranked fourth out of those three. Bruning, back to you. Pick one out of the Alabama wide receivers. A guy Hall, JoJo Earl, Ja'Cory Brooks, or Christian Leary?
I'm going to stick with Brooks. I said earlier he's still my highest rated guy. I mean, Hall and Leary are close for me, but I've got Brooks just a little bit ahead of him, so I'm going to stick with Brooks.
Kyle, Hall, Earl, Brooks, or Leary?
I'm going to go with Earl. He just is the type of receiver that I'm looking for. I actually have taken a full pivot, and where I used to love the Des Bryant type receivers, I just think that the NFL is moving away from that, and I'll take your Jalen Waddles and your JoJo Earls and your Rondale Moores and your Elijah Moores all day. So I'm an Earl guy.
I agree with you. JoJo Earl is my second-rated freshman player after Travion Henderson. Rapid fire. Back to you, Bruning. Does Texas finish the 2021 season with a top 10 ranking? Yes or no?
Yes. And I hate saying that.
Well, I'm fortunate that I've got a friend named Biff, and he showed me his almanac right before the show. And they actually will finish 11th this year.
Damn.
Bruning, Rondale Moore, Jamar Chase.
Jamar Chase.
Kyle.
Jamar Chase.
Bruning, in 2021, the best quarterback in the Big Ten is?
In 2021, Kyle McCord. Not even a question.
Kyle?
Can I say no one? Can I say they don't have a good quarterback?
You gotta pick one. Pick one.
Okay. How about this? Because I've seen the almanac. So Michael Penix at Indiana until he gets hurt middle of the season, and then it's C.J. Stroud finishes as the top man.
Does Michael Penix have a ceiling where he could be a day one or day two quarterback? I have been standing on the Michael Penix for a while. Strong left-handed, who's tough as nails, but he's just injury prone. Can you see him being maybe late day one, day two prospect? Am I wrong on that?
If he didn't get hurt this year, I would have been willing to agree with you, but his injury history is now really extensive. It's literally every season he has a season leg too. Injury. So unfortunately, I love him too. He's so fun to watch. A great value in a campus to Canton league as well. But
yes,
I can't buy him just with the injury history.
I think it's right ACL, clavicle injury. So he has not finished the season yet in his career. Bruning. And for the record, I think I'm going to take Talia Tagovailoa as the best quarterback in the Big Ten. Bruning, Tanks Bigsby or Jahmyr Gibbs?
Bigsby.
Kyle?
Yeah, I'm going to agree Bigsby. I think they're both comparable talents. I think with the new hire in Auburn, they just feed their backs like we've seen sometimes in the past with Auburn guys that the head coach came from Boise, and so they had, like, before the COVID year, I think they had 7 or 8 consecutive years with 1,000-yard rusher, and they get Bobo, who likes to pound it. So I think his production profile will slightly put him over Gibbs for me.
I'm going to go with Gibbs as the pass catcher. I have Bigsby ranked third, my running backs. Bruning, The 2021 national champion is, oh my God, who's the national champion, Bruning?
It hurts.
Are you gonna?
I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it because they're gonna win it in 2022. I'm gonna go. God, I really don't know. I want to pick someone off the thing. I'm gonna go as much. God, I hate saying this. I'm gonna go Clemson. I think DJU is gonna get them there. Yeah.
Yeah, this hurts me to say as well. I'm actually going to go Georgia. They finally get over the hump.
I like it.
I think that we've identified. I think that both of those teams are going to be in the playoff, but I also think that Oklahoma could finish the season as the number 1 ranked team, and I'm going to take Oklahoma to get a national championship. The question of the hour, and Bruni, I already know your answer, so we're going to close the show with this: Mr. Franchise, Justin Fields or Zach Wilson?
It's Justin Fields for me here.
Let's go.
I figured Matt would like that one. But yeah, I'm actually pretty partial towards Fields. I'm from the Atlanta area. He's from the Metro Atlanta area. So I've followed his career for a long, long time, have some mutual friends really close to him. So I've been able to kind of learn a little bit more about who he is and everything like that. So I'm a Fields guy, but I'd like to think objectively, I would still say Fields.
I'm gonna have to reconsider what I said earlier. Hey, we really appreciate Kyle. Anything that you want to plug before we get you out of here?
No, just wanted to say thanks to you guys for having me on. And I mentioned to you guys previously, I'm excited that you guys are doing what you're doing at Campus to Canton. If you're listening and you're still on the fence about the format, do it. I said once, if a zombie apocalypse comes and I can only take one format's bylaws and put them in a time capsule and bury it, it would be Campus to Canton. So I think it's the premier format. I think it's going to continue to grow. If you're not a big college fan, it'll make you interested in college. And if you are, then it's tailor-made for you. So just wanted to say thanks to you guys for having me on. Excited about what you guys have doing, and happy to support you guys in any way I can. And thanks for having me on. And if anyone wants to get any more information about the Devy Watch, you can go to devywatch.com. It's DEVYWATCH.com. And we sell annual subscriptions to our sites where we're constantly hammering out different things, and then also have access separately to the guide that will actually refresh. We'll do a volume 2 come probably May, where we'll respond to any actionable information that we get through spring, because that's such a critical piece when we're learning more about depth charts, who's emerging, who got hurt. And I also do some more if you are a nerd like me and enjoyed hearing anything about offensive coordinator philosophies. I actually go through every single coaching change, whether it was a head coach or an offensive coordinator, and I profile as much of their historical production I have, and then give some insight into who are players you could target in a variety of formats. So thanks again to you guys for having me, and really enjoyed being on.
Thank you to Kyle. Follow Kyle at FranchiseKF on Twitter. Go buy the Devy Watch at devywatch.com. That's going to be our show for tonight. You can find our written content. Mr. Bruning has an article up on Kyle McCord. He's got an article up on Travion Henderson. I have an article up most recently on the values at the quarterback position according to our March ADP. So go check that out. Find all of our written content at campuscanton.com. Follow the show at Devy Debate. Apologies to Kirk Herbstreit. We went a little long with Kyle, so we had to bump him. We'll get him rescheduled soon. For Matt Bruning, for Kyle Francis, I'm Felix Sharp. Good night and good luck. Good show.
All right. Yes, thank you. All right, I'm going to add Austin, and I'm going to grab my dinner really quick. So give me 1 second.
What's up, Austin?
What's going on, guys?
What's up, Austin?
Good show. Good show.
I hope you enjoyed yourself. That you'll come back to us, Kyle.
Yeah, no, I'm game to come on. I don't do a ton of podcasting, because sometimes just like the timing of it and stuff like that is a little bit hard. I mean, the weather's so nice right now, I can sit outside, but I'm a loud talker. I'd wake up everybody in the house if I was inside. So the podcasts I do more of, they're like, hey, are you available at 1 o'clock in the afternoon? I'm like, I certainly am.
Well, let me add, I got some, so we have a Discord at campustocanton.com, and there were some things that they wanted to ask you. This is from Riddler. on Campus to Canton, the Discord. What are 2 things that the Devy Watch team does differently today? And I think Riddler, no, that's RT. I was going to say this guy might be a retired lawyer. That's somebody else. But what are 2 things that the Devy Watch team does differently today than when they started that you believe is leading to improved results? That's from Riddler.
That's a good question. I think probably something that I have championed myself is that we appropriately rank incoming freshmen. I think that has been something that the Devy community as a whole doesn't do very well. I think that if we're looking at a pendulum on our team, I am way on the side of freshmen don't matter. And then there's others that their lifeblood is freshmen and continue to draft them. So the good news is we have 6 guys on the team, and so we balance each other out. It's a sort of unofficial checks and balances, and I think you guys will enjoy that as well. I guess just before I get back more into his question, it's a beautiful thing because you have 6 intelligent, different people bringing their talents and their opinions to the table, but on the same side of that, it's incredibly frustrating because you have to sacrifice some of your strong convictions for the good of the team. So it's a humbling experience as well. So I would say that has been one thing we've done is really try to appropriately rank freshmen. And I actually wrote an addendum. If you looked at the 2024 wide receiver rankings, I actually said, hey, I really want to write up an addendum and I want to tell people we don't see a lot of potential for early production for this freshman class across the board. I mean, very, very few of them, I think you can confidently say, hey, they're going to have a really good season this year. And so we just chose to say, hey, we're actually not really going to evaluate opportunity. We're just going to say who we think the best guys are. And so what we elected to do was let's not have any of these guys ranked in the 30s when they're not going to produce. And every year they're going to be a depreciating asset. That's just the reality of the game because every year there's more and more beautiful looking freshman receivers in particular. I mean, all we're watching is their highlights and they have plenty. And so if they're not going to step on the field and produce, they're depreciating as an asset one way or another. Now they could bounce back up, but why not start with them a little bit lower and then let's gradually work their way up and let's try to get the production now, see that asset appreciate when they're on the field and then go from there. So I would say one big thing has been appropriately ranking the freshmen. And then if I were to say a second thing that I like that we do is now that we're doing the volume 2, I actually think that that's really helpful. It's really important for us to be first to market in terms of putting out a pure Devy guide this early in the season. We think that that's a way just from a business standpoint, just to increase market share, to be first. We also want it to be actionable information. You know, if we release this product in August, it's nice for me to toot my own horn, but it's not helping you in your draft. So I really like that we reevaluate after spring. We catch our breath. We have conversations with you guys and we say, hey, should we reevaluate Sean Tucker? You know, conversations like that come up. And the grind is so tedious when we're putting this thing together. By the end of it, to be honest with you, I'm just like, I don't care where you have him. Just put him in there. I'm going to sleep. You know, I've been doing this. I've been doing this for months, you know, like just put him in there. And I'm just being real with that. You know, it's just at that point, you're just trying to not be totally apathetic and still wanting to have a high standard of excellence, but you're just ready to be done. So I would say adding our volume 2 has been something I've really appreciated that we've done as well.
You know, I don't know if you got to in Austin, jump in here whenever you want to. I don't know if you listened to our last show, but the way you described how you all rank players is exactly how they do at 24/7. Like it's exactly how they do at 24/7. Where I mean, it's almost kind of like the same format that they use for the Hall of Fame selection, where you get a group of writers in the room, and one writer is presenting on a player, and then they kind of vote and argue about it. But anyway, the way that you've described that your team ranks players is exactly what Alan told us last week.
Yeah. Before I let Austin get a word in, I actually want to kind of back that up to what we do first. So LJ Cheney, who was one of the founders of Dynasty Football Factory, which is where we were before we started Devy Watch, but that's where the project was birthed. He worked for a while with, I think the guy's name's Eric Galco. He's on Twitter. Has his own scouting service. So he's kind of an independent. He's not really tied into the NFL, but he has influence in the NFL. LJ spent one season working for him as a regional scout, and they created a grading rubric that was numerical. And so it essentially goes from 10. 10 essentially means you're Randy Moss, right? Like that's the type of prospect that we think that you're going to be. And really the threshold where we determine fantasy relevance is 6.5. That's kind of the cutoff for you're right on the edge of round 3, round 4. And so one of the challenges that we have is standardization, because it's good that we have at least something to go on, but all three of us could look at one prospect and our scales just may be scaled differently, right? There may be something like I may be very, very hesitant to hand out anything above a 9, whereas you may say, no, 9's good. Like I'll give lots of 9s and different things like that. And so because we have 6 opinions, we can't necessarily standardize it in the way that we want, but we're at least attempting to do that. So what we do first is give numerical rankings. And we want to say, let's get all of our 6.5s on a spreadsheet and work on those write-ups first. And then from there, we start saying, okay, we're at 320 guys. Okay, that's too many. We need to start dialing back. And then so we kind of use those numbers to start with, lay it out on a spreadsheet. And then from there, we kind of look at that. And because we know there's differences in opinions, like one of our rankers loves true freshmen. And so he had a guy who's not going to probably have a catch until 2023 at Ohio State at a 9.5. So he would have been a first round recommendation for us. But again, going back to my point earlier, forget about it, because all you're going to do is be mad at us if you draft him and he doesn't pop until 2023 to no fault of his own. So we kind of have to parse through some of that, and then we start and we say, let's make our first tier. And we kind of like that to be 12-ish. I mean, just because it's kind of a clean round. And then our tiers get larger. So let's aim small, miss small. Let's get roughly 10 to 15 guys. Then let's go maybe 10 to 15, 20 again in tier 2. And then we kind of break it down that way. And so then once we have our tiers set, all of us rank those guys within the tier. So then we take those averages, parse out our tiers. The other benefit to that is if all of us have the guy at the end of a tier, like we unanimously agree this is the worst guy in the tier, then we have a specific discussion about them. Should he be down a tier and at the top? Like, is our tier really articulating what our true belief of this player is? And so, again, because we have all these checks and balances, it allows us to hopefully communicate the way we feel about players from a ranking standpoint. But again, it's always going to be imperfect. We're just trying to limit our imperfections.
That what you described is wanting to rank the top 12 because that's around. That's exactly why they give 32 5. Is that right, Austin? Is that what he said? They give 32 5 stars. They will only give 32 5 stars to reflect the first 32 picks in the NFL draft. So
yeah, that's cool. That's good. We actually didn't know that, so that's kind of neat that that's the way they do it as well.
Austin, I've got other questions here, but you've been listening. I want you to get in here. I got some other questions from the Discord, though. So go ahead, Austin.
Oh, Matt said he had a follow-up like 7 minutes ago. You hopped in ahead of him, Felix, but
no,
I don't even know if he's still
been
there.
going in and out. I don't know if Matt is here or not. So.
I was eating. I didn't want you guys to just sit here and watch me shoveling food down my face, so I thought it'd be polite to put myself off camera. No, I just want, and this is going to obviously change because you were talking about Devy with the freshmen, but since you play so much campus to Canton, how does your evaluation change for freshmen with that format?
I'm pretty similar.
Okay.
I've only also keep in mind, I mean, I'm relatively still new to the space. I didn't know what a dynasty league was or Devy was until 2017. So I'm only 4 years in before I even knew what these things were. And they kind of forced me in some ways to join Dynasty Football Factory. I was like, guys, I don't really have any desire really to get in this space. I like talking about football, but like, I'm not a huge fantasy gamer. And I just liked the guys, to be honest with you. I just clicked with them, and I'm kind of like, all right, like, I'll give it a shot. We're talking football, I'll do it. And then it just kind of evolved into something where I liked the strategy. I liked the challenge of it. And because I didn't know anything, it was good to just kind of almost like doing a startup business where you're just growing the thing from the beginning. And so, but yeah, I'm kind of the same way in Campus to Canton as well. Really the only slots I use for freshmen is if you give me 5 free taxi slots at the end, then I'll just backfill those later. But I'm not drafting hardly any premier names. I mean, really the only premier names that I have that I take as freshmen. Now I take that back. Spencer Rattler I took with a first round pick, but that's because I try to have a chokehold on the Oklahoma quarterback room. Just philosophically, I want as many of those guys backfilled, and I was a huge Spencer Rattler fan in college. So he's one of the few guys I've spent a pick on, but I mean, really the guys that have any name cachet that I have on my Campus to Canton leagues would be Hudson Card, because I really wanted Sam Ellinger's heir. And then Josh Downs, because I love him as a player, and I wanted Daz Newsom's heir in the slot that we saw AJ Brown dominate in, and then Daz Newsome. And so it's one of the most historically profitable college fantasy roles. And in my opinion, he's as skilled as any wide receiver in college football. He just hadn't been able to show it yet. But I mean, really other than that, I have some, I mean, Imani Bailey at Louisiana Lafayette, Alan Horace at UTSA, who was a tight end. He didn't do anything, but I was convinced last year he had a shot. So I kind of have some scrubs, but I just don't really. DeAndre Swift is the only freshman I've ever taken in a Devy draft. That's because I knew he was going to be what he was. But I just generally avoid it.
Okay. So are you a big Caleb Williams guy then? Talking about the Oklahoma quarterbacks, because you're going to have to spend an early pick on him too. And I don't think he's, Rattler was kind of unrefined coming out of high school to a point. But, if you consider him unrefined, then Caleb Williams is, unbelievably just raw.
Part of it for me in the Campus to Canton League where I have Rattler, just thinking about it strategically. So I drafted Patrick Mahomes on the NFL side when he was a rookie. So I had Mahomes, and then I think I took like Rivers and Trubisky. So I was getting by, right? I had 3 quarterbacks in a super flex. And then from there, I've since added Lamar Jackson was my first pick I ever took, and the campus side. In 2017, Lamar Jackson was my first round pick, and they laughed me out of the chat. They're like, "You're an idiot. What are you doing?" And I had no idea what I was doing. I actually drafted a terrible team. I went way too heavy college fantasy. And I actually still subscribe to that theory of building college fantasy heavy. The problem was I wasn't very good at college fantasy. So I was zigging when everyone else was zagging, but I'm not nearly as informed then as I was now. And so I look back at that draft and I just feel sick. I'm like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? What I learned shortly thereafter is in Campus to Canton, I'm on the waiver wire. I'm churning players in Campus to Canton. I'm not looking for many NFL stashes. If I don't think you can have 1,000 yards, you don't have a place on my team, period, the end. Unless you are a Caleb Williams, who I know you are going to be the heir to a top 5 college fantasy production offense moving forward. So I'm more willing to draft backups and wait a year or two knowing, okay, they're going to get there. But to answer your question about Caleb Williams, I'm honestly pretty behind on the freshman class just because I don't care about him. I'm only assigned my guys for the Devy Watch. I don't really watch guys beyond that. I'm about to start because now I'm getting into spring ball, but I'm about to fully switch gears to college fantasy mode, and then I'm going to need to get more up to date with the freshmen. So I don't really have many strong takes. I like what I've seen from him, but I mean, yeah, he definitely doesn't look like a super refined player yet. I probably won't use a pick on him because my NFL side I'm about to add Rattler to that. So every week I didn't finish my thought earlier. So every week, once Rattler comes up, I'm going to decide between Mahomes, Lamar, Kyler, and Rattler. In the Super
That's
Bowl.
the team I was telling you guys about the other day where you posted it on Twitter at one point. And I was like, his worst player is like Tyreek Hill or something. Like
and I actually was looking at it. So hold on. This is just I'm not a big braggart guy, but I was looking at this. I took that year.
Show. Go ahead, man.
I took Christian McCaffrey in the 3rd. I took Devontae Adams in the 5th. I took Kamara in the 6th. I took Hill in the 7th. I took Mahomes in the 8th. So then I've, since then added on like just guys like David Montgomery and, college guys that I really liked a lot that I've just beefed it up. And then so, and you guys know this, if you want to be an NFL player, you probably need to be a high producer in college.
Yes.
Like it's I'm not saying they're mutually exclusive, but Felix, I believe, is it you that likes Jalen Darden? Have I heard you talk about him? Have I seen that from you, or am I misremembering it? But I mean, to me, he kind of goes back to the Dante Wright example and the George Holani example. I mean, Jalen Darden's on all my college fantasy teams and my C2C teams. Do I expect to start him in the NFL? No, I hope not. But I mean, if he pops like Darnell Mooney, I could slide him in there and in the flex spot, but I would much rather have that high end college production. And if you can appreciate beyond that, and if you score 20 touchdowns, you're going to get a look. So yeah,
I kept tweeting at Jim Nagy, like trying to get Jalen Darden to the Senior Bowl, but
he's a good player, man. He could be one of those outliers that could do some damage. He's a dangerous player.
And I admittedly, I fall in love with these deep prospects. I wanted to ask you about Jake Haener. But he's in the other division. But I just found out about Jake Haener. I don't want to get to my questions because we do have some Discord. But if you could talk about Jake Haener, and at the same time, how wide is the gap between Bijan Robinson and the other 2023 RBs? Haener and RBs between Bijan and Robinson.
Is this one for me? I don't want to just keep talking. I feel like I'm yapping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. You're our guest.
We had a massive debate about Haener the other day. We don't need to drudge that back up. So that's all you.
I don't have an opinion about him as an NFL prospect. I haven't looked at him through that lens. I think he's going to be really productive this season in that offense, which again, I think will probably get him on the radar. But he's not a player that, he transferred from Washington, right? Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know enough about these guys because I cover all the teams, but he's not a guy that I've spent much time on. So if I don't know about a guy, I'll just say I don't know.
Okay. Well, if you take a look at it, I might later in the season, I might have to reach back out to you.
I'll hit you up after I look at the Mountain West. I'll give you some thoughts.
Okay.
And then to answer the next question, I'm probably
how wide is the gap? How wide is the gap?
Not wide for me. I mean, because at the end of the day, think about the conversations that we're having now. I don't want to speak out of turn, but let's assume there's a big three in this rookie class right now. Okay. You've got Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne. Let's assume that the market generally thinks those are the top three. There's a lot of people that could be swayed to put any one of those guys in the first spot, depending on where they land. I mean, I care a lot about landing spot, maybe too much, but it's significant to me. And so I don't think we should get too locked in about a prospect. If you look to me that you're going to be, a first or second round running back, then I'm not going to get too dialed in. I had Robinson ahead of all of them, but I think that I had Tank next. And if someone wanted to trade with me, if I had Robinson and well, I don't even know if I'm going to say that right, but essentially if I could get Tank plus something else, not even huge, I'd make that trade. I mean, so to me, there's not a huge gap.
One last one, Max Borghi, any chance to rise up backup draft boards? That's from Dynasty PJ. And that other question on Bijan was from Jester 388. I just want to make sure I'm throwing that out there. But this is from Dynasty PJ. Does Max Borghi have a chance to rise back up draft boards?
Well, Austin and I are the only ones that we go back years now. So Austin's known my love for Borghi for a lot of years. I actually covered him as an incoming freshman and fell in love with him. So I was super high on him. I would say I've learned a couple of lessons since then. The first being he still hasn't tipped the scales at 200 yet, which is insane to me because he's so powerful, but he still hasn't put 200 on the board, and he's now entering year 4. So again, kind of going back to my comment earlier about Ely, he's a lot closer. He's been hovering around 199, 198, 199 the whole time he's been in school. So he would need to add a little bit more weight. The other phenomenon, and I'm going to deep dive this a little bit, but I've just kind of discovered this anecdotally, is we're almost never seeing the NFL take a running back who plays in an air raid or an iteration of the air raid in rounds 1.
His predecessor, Boobie thought Boobie Williams was going to get drafted.
Right. But I mean, it's not just them. I mean, literally think about that. Go back and look at recent drafts, just pull up drafthistory.com and look at it. And if you remember their college schemes, almost none of them drafted in the early rounds, which is, again, all I care about, played in an air raid scheme. For whatever reason, I think the NFL either undervalues or struggles to properly evaluate them, could be a nicer way to say it. And so that's just something I recently started really kind of chewing on this cycle, because I like a lot of those backs. I mean, I look at guys like that. I'm like, Max Borghi could make any NFL team better. I can say that with confidence. He would be an upgrade. I'm not saying he would necessarily be like the feature guy, but his pass catching ability and what he's able to do, he would make any NFL team better. He takes a backseat to no one there. So I would say, yes, he still has a chance, but my confidence level with him was it waxing or waning? It's decreasing every year.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I really like Jo'quavious Marks last year too, but obviously the same thing. Going to Mississippi State. The same scheme that Borghi was in, where it's like, hey, you're going to make your 60 catches, which to me, I'm like, NFL, open your eyes. Like, if for no other reason, use him like Nyheim Hines. If you want to get a Jonathan Taylor, do it. But Nyheim Hines could play on any team as well. He's a value add, but that doesn't necessarily translate to fantasy, which is what we care about most. And more important than that, if you want to translate to fantasy, you have to translate to the NFL's opinion of players. And so I've learned that my opinions matter very little. The opinions of the NFL matter everything. I've been wondering how much of that is like chicken and egg. Are those guys getting recruited to air raid because they fall flat in the face of higher level evaluators, or is, once they go there, are they less desirable because they never develop a certain way? I've been going back and forth on that for a while, because the wide receivers are like that too. You don't really see air raid wide receivers succeed that much. Mike Leach has really only produced Crabtree in all his years of coaching. And it's similarly with other serious air raid style offenses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tend to agree with you, and I don't have a good answer there. I know that McCaffrey, Borghi, I was a Freudian slip there, but I know I've angered a lot of people over the years because I made the white on white comparison. But I mean, to me, they remind me of one another. I mean, they really do. I mean, Borghi even says he idolized him. He was recruited by the Stanford running back coach who handpicked McCaffrey. I mean, there's a lot of similarities in terms of what they could be. Now, I don't think Borghi is going to be that level of player, but I mean, in terms of how you can deploy a guy. So yeah, I mean, for whatever reason, I think Borghi could have gone a lot of other places, but if I were advising someone now and they were a running back, I would say, don't go to an air raid, because it's going to hurt your chances moving forward.
So we asked Alan True this last week, and I want to ask you: was there a player that didn't make it into the Devy Watch guide that you petitioned hard for? Was there a guy that you really wanted to get in? You really liked what you saw in him, but for whatever reason, he just didn't make it into the guide?
No, because we have enough guys that make it that if you want to pound the table for someone, we'll let you have them in. We got 200 and, we may have gotten to 265, and then there were 12 guys that people were like, please put him in. And I'm like, I don't care, whatever. You want to write them up? That's your time, not mine. Go ahead and throw them in there at the end. So because our process is a little bit different now, if we had to cut it off at 100, then yeah, maybe there would be guys that I would feel more adamantly, they should be in there. But just by virtue of how many guys we put in, we kind of give each other that graciousness to, okay, throw them in there. So, yeah.
I get that. That's like Jake Haener with Felix. We just kind of let him put him in there because he's not going to have any kind of
well, we actually do something where when we do our rankings call, we call it internally. We say play your card. So essentially, there's no limit on cards. You just don't be a jerk about it. But if you essentially say, I'm playing my card on Jace McClellan, then you're essentially saying, I'm stamping him into this tier. And if we want to fight about it, I got an hour. Let's go, everybody. Let's go 5-on-1. I'm willing, I accept the challenge. And so we allow one another to say, and that's just what we call it. We just say, play your card. And so someone will be like, hey, I'm playing my card, put them in that tier. And so it's as simple as that. I mean, it's a 6-person imperfect, more art than science. And we say, okay, put them in there. And sometimes I can look at that and say, oh my gosh, what did we just do? Or sometimes I'm the guy doing it and they're looking at me. Sometimes we look smart. Sometimes hey, Kyle's an idiot, so it's give and take.
I feel like that's us with me on Grant Gunnell, just standing alone on that island that he's going to be good. And everybody's telling me I'm an idiot. That was the one we had the biggest argument about the other day. We did like a whole ranking summit for kind of what you're talking about. We tried to do it live for like just to give an idea of what we did and how we got to our process. And that was our big battle was between Grant Gunnell and Jake Hayner because Felix is all in love with him. And I think Gunnell, I mean, I know he hasn't produced, but I think a lot of that is weird year last year, didn't get to play that much. He was splitting time with Khalil Tate as a freshman. Yeah. Finally is now starting what I think is a great offense for his skill set. I think he's going to blow up this year. So I'm big on Gunnell.
He's going to produce. I mean, he's a Power 5 talent in a really quarterback friendly scheme. So, I mean, I think both of you guys could look good from a production standpoint this year. Now, whether or not either of them can evolve, I think
Hayner. I think Hayner is a day 2 quarterback. I think he could potentially be a day 2 quarterback. He's got the mobility. He can throw off platform. He's got a little bit of Konami code, and then he's going to be super productive in that Fresno State offense. So I can't wait to watch the Mountain West this year. I tell you this, and looking through, like I always get intrigued with the deep prospects. It's just like, Levante Bellamy, Jonathan Ward, go deeper than that. Pete Guerrero, like it's just these guys that I fall in love with. Mike Warren out of Cincinnati. I don't have to dig that deep, but Xavier Betts out of Nebraska, like I've really been plugging hard for him. And I think you guys had him in the 30s or 40s for wide receivers. And I was like, yes, finally somebody that says like this kid who just made, he made like 3 or 4 plays last year, but you look at his body, you look at his athleticism and what they have around him there at Nebraska. I'm like, this is a good player. This is a really good player. And I know that you don't cover the Big Ten, but I'm just saying, like going through the Devy Watch, I was like, yeah, I'm glad that somebody likes, one of these players that I'm really high on.
Well, you're in luck there because he was one of my randomly assorted freshmen. So when he was a freshman.
Oh yeah, okay.
So I lobbied to get him in as a true freshman. So I agree with you. I like him. And just to give a matter of perspective in terms of where we'll have him or where we're truly valuing him, we're in the middle of doing a 2023 only Devy mock right now. And so I think Betts either just got taken at the end of the 3rd round of only his class or is about to be taken. So that's kind of our rough valuation if you're looking at like, okay, he probably looks like if we're forecasting rookie drafts out, he's probably a marginal day 2 pick at this point with the opportunity to grow beyond.
Okay, good for me.
Yeah,
good for me. So, Austin, you got anything else?
No, I don't think so.
I just want to it's like a fire hose. The whole show is just like a fire hose.
The show was a lot of fun. Yeah, I knew that 3 Archer answer because I'm a huge Steelers fan. I was like, as soon as you said, I was like 3 Archer.
He did. He posted it in the comments. I just didn't put it on there because I didn't know it and I didn't want Felix to get it by me throwing it up there. So I was just wanted to see because I had no idea who it was. So I was like, I'll just leave it off and see if Felix can guess it.
I would have gotten it if I had. I just didn't realize Dree Archer was a 2nd round draft pick.
I think he was 3rd round. I think he was a 3rd round.
Oh, 3rd round. Okay.
Might have been the same year we took Senquez Golson in the 2nd and we took Archer in the 3rd. I think it was not a great year for our day 2 picks, but for our round 1 pick, I forget, it was somebody, Bud Dupree maybe. It was somebody that ended up being really good, so it ended up equaling out in the end.
Hey, you guys, you had something on the show sheet. So before I answer the question, I'm going to ask you guys a question. Okay.
Okay.
Tell me what these names have in common. All right. I'm going to read off a few names here. Donovan Peoples-Jones, Joseph Lewis, Jeff Thomas, Trevin Grimes, Tyjon Lindsey, DJ Matthews, Jamon Osborne, Justin Shorter, Darian Kendrick, Devin Williams, Jordan Adams, Marquise Spiker, Brennan Eagles, Dom Blaylock, Kyle Ford, Jeremiah Payton. $20 to anybody who tells me if they can tell me what all those guys have in common.
A high spark score?
Nope.
No, because Trevin Grimes is in there. I don't think Trevin Grimes has a.
I bet he does. What's weight adjusted? I bet he has a pretty nice one.
I mean, I almost want to
go all the same high school or something. I've got no idea.
Nope. This is in response to your Damon Demas question. So
yeah. Oh, Damon Demas, what the hell?
All of those guys that I just named were 24/7 Sports composite top 10 receivers in the 2017, 2018, and 2019 classes. Yeah. So that's 16 names right there of a potential 30. 16 total turds, right? Like no Devy assets in that group. And so that kind of again goes to speak to why I just avoid freshmen like the plague and why I avoid freshman receivers in particular. Think about this. Think about how much experience as a scout Alan True has, to use him for an example. Infinitely more than I do. Probably infinitely more than all of us do, as a scout. Extremely experienced. Now, not just his experience in scouting and his primary profession, think about the level of access that he has to these players, their coaches, the camps, their teammates, their everybody. So think about how informed these guys are relative to us. And then think about over 50% are going to be irrelevant from a fantasy standpoint as it comes to the game that we play. And so the reason why I brought all of that up is I know that Demas was ranked third within that class in terms of composite on that list, but I just don't know that there's any guarantee that the merits of someone in high school are necessarily going to directly translate to becoming a fantasy asset. And so I highlighted him and a couple of the things that I think kind of work not in his favor. Again, going back to my analogy of there's a lot of people that really, really value breakout age. Well, he's currently 20 years old right now. He was 20 years old as a freshman. He'll be 21 by Thanksgiving as a sophomore. He'll be 22 and a half on draft day. And what I like to do when I'm thinking about things, as much as I hate Twitter right now and as much as I don't ever care to hear about a rookie again for the rest of my life, think about the narratives that we're hearing on Twitter right now and then apply them to Devy. So we hear about BMI, we hear about breakout age, we hear about all of these things. Whether there's actually signal to that and it matters, it doesn't really matter because it matters within the market. Like that impacts their market valuation for fantasy owners, which is what we care about. And so, I think at a minimum, he's going to have, it's highly unlikely he breaks out next season. So he's not going to have a true breakout age. His breakout age probably comes at age 22, which puts him in a really, really dangerous bucket from a historical standpoint. Then the other issues that he has are, here's the reality. He hasn't caught a pass in a football game since 2018.
3 years.
He missed his season. He played in 4 games, didn't make a catch this season. This isn't exactly the Alabama wide receiver room he was competing against. It wasn't like he couldn't carve out a role, but he did nothing. Okay, he had COVID. It's a pandemic. Okay, I'm willing to look past that to a certain degree. But then you get to the issue of, and this is again where I agree and disagree with the cliche that gets thrown around, is people say, scout the player, not the helmet. Agree in theory, don't always agree in execution of that, because the reality is if you play at a premier program, you have scouts' eyes on you from the day you step in the door because they're scouting your seniors. The NFL is there watching you for years and years and years, talking to your coaches, doing everything like that. And again, is it chicken or egg? But there's a reason why we see guys that are playing in the, college football playoffs every year being drafted pretty highly after. One is because they are probably a high pedigree recruit to go to those schools to be an elite program. So they start off above a lot of others. But then secondarily beyond that is, at the end of the day, it's a people-driven business. These are human people that are scouts that are doing their best to relay their concerns, their excitement to upper middle management and trying to communicate to them. And so there's only so much scouting you can do at a place like Fresno State or at Nevada because they don't have the type of prospects where they have 4 years worth of scouts cataloging those guys. And so I actually have started to kind of subscribe more towards, if the NFL is showing me that they're not taking players from a certain program, or maybe they're souring on players from a program like the University of Washington, maybe specifically with some of their offensive skill players who have turned into duds in the NFL. I would say the majority of us here would be surprised that Gaskin and Ahmed essentially went undrafted or whatever they did. That would have been unheard of in Devy circles a few years ago to say that. But I do think that there is an element of the NFL is looking at these guys and, hey, for whatever reason, these guys aren't translating the same way as maybe they are at another program. So that's another thing with Jimbo Fisher. He's never had an NFL fantasy relevant wide receiver. Never one. They haven't had a 1,000-yard receiver under him. I'm looking at the past 7 years. So perhaps before that.
I was going to say Kelvin Benjamin is the only one I can think of. That's a Jimbo guy.
And then Green was like a 4th-round draft pick for the Jaguars, but
so they had
relevant.
They had that 1,000-yard receiver, whoever it was, in I believe it was 2013 at Florida State, and since then they haven't fostered another 1,000-yard receiver. I actually pulled up the numbers. Hold on, let me look at this. So the average the average wide receiver one under Jimbo over the past 7 seasons, 58 catches, 821 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Only one of them has reached 1,000 yards. So already there, if we figure you're going to the NFL and you don't have a 1,000-yard reception ledger at all, and you're older, and, a few other things like that. I mean, he's 6'3", 180. So he's jealous of Devontae Smith's girth. So, I mean, those are just all things for me where it's easy for me to cut bait on a player like that until they prove me otherwise. Like, I'm okay if he becomes everything we thought he was going to be in terms of just this freak athlete, incredible player. If he evolves into that just based on my process, I'm okay with missing on that. I'm not okay chasing that at a premium pick. We had him ranked 35th overall last season. And again, that goes back to my point where I really fought for us this year. His ceiling last year, his realistic ceiling was 25 or 30 catches in a regular season, not even the pandemic factored in. I mean, that's just the reality. That was his ceiling. And then if he did that, yeah, maybe he stays up a little bit. But then if he tanks a year, man, there's no quicker way to lose money than on a freshman receiver.
That's just really good stuff. I mean, that's just really good stuff. I don't have him rostered anywhere, and now I'm like thinking about where I have him ranked.
Well, I mean, I think especially with what you guys are doing in a campus to Canton format, it's highly unlikely that if anything, his touches this year could go more towards a guy like Baylor Cupp, who was more highly rated at tight end than any other player in the country, but he hasn't been able to play because he's been hurt his whole time. So his value has crashed. And then they have Jalen Weidemeyer, who I personally believe is the best tight end in this upcoming rookie class. And so then you have Anais Smith, who I think is a phenomenal player. And then Isaiah Spiller's going to be getting the ball. Haynes King's going to be running the ball. I mean, where is his realistic upside this year? So especially in campus to Canton formats, I always roster Jimbo backs, and that's part of the reason why I really like LJ Johnson. He would be a problem.
I was just going to ask. Yeah. Okay.
For me, he would be a guy that I would pay up for because he's not going to have as much name cachet, but I will try to draft LJ Johnson in Campus to Canton leagues this year because I can just let him rest. And then I'm going to get 1,000-yard season as a sophomore, 1,000 yards as a junior. Then he's going to the NFL. So I can feel really confident about his trajectory on both the Campus and Canton side of things. And
I think that Katie Flower highlighted his verified measurables. I mean, he's over 200 pounds. I think he had a 34-inch vertical and is it a 4.45? I mean, I'm just remembering the last show. I think that those, those were his verified measurables. So
I was actually bummed because I covered, I think his name's Amari Daniels. He's one of the kids down from Miami that he committed before LJ Johnson did to Texas A&M. And I love the 5'8", 200. If you're 5'8", 200, you got a fan in me. I just love the Edward Solaire. I'll watch you play. But I really liked him, and I was thinking, okay, I don't really think Devin Akane is going to be anything more than a change of pace guy for them. So someone is going to step into massive opportunity in the college and NFL side in 2022 and 2023 for Texas A&M. So I was kind of thinking, okay, maybe it's Daniels, and I hadn't really watched LJ Johnson, and then I saw that he was between Texas and Texas A&M, and I'm like, well, he's an idiot if he goes to Texas because he's going to sit behind Bijan, but I said he's got 1 year to wait, and then he can, be a Jimbo Fisher back, which means you're going to the NFL, guaranteed. And so then I started watching him, I'm like, holy smokes, this guy's real good.
Okay, I got to adjust my freshman rankings then.
So to answer your question, Felix, you have him at 24 right now. I pulled up our
I have
ranks.
LJ Johnson at 24?
No, Demas or Demas.
Oh, Demas, okay.
Me and Colin are actually a little bit lower on him than everybody else. I have him at 31. Colin has him at 34. And then Austin has him at 28.
Yeah, for me, he's not on any radar for me in any capacity, for me personally.
Is there anything else on the show sheet? I mean, I want to get everything. Let's just keep squeezing. If you got something else that you prepared, give it to me.
I'm scrolling.
At the same time, I want to be, respectful of your time. But if you've got it, we'll take it.
Okay, I'll go one more. Matt Corral.
Yes.
Okay. So I actually had just written this up in an excerpt. So I'm just gonna read you what I recently wrote. Matt Corral was one of my favorite quarterback recruits in recent years. He's got an NFL toolbox, and he showed a lot of good and some bad in his first full year as a starter in 2020. Aside from the well-known names at the top of the quarterback board, I'd be most inclined to take a shot on Corral and his potential as a dual threat weapon that could be selected in the first round of the draft. The only thing that Corral lacks relative to Zach Wilson is a consistent final season of college football. The opportunity for that still exists.
Yes.
So I if I'm looking at the quarterback landscape, I actually personally I'm okay if you did a big 4 tier. I'm okay with Rattler, Howell, DJ, Young. I'm an Alabama fan, and I honestly am probably a little bit more critical on Alabama fans. I'm kind of the anti-homer. But Young didn't look great in mop-up duty last year. He just didn't – at no point did he do anything that led me to believe maybe we made a mistake with Mac Jones. Maybe they should have gone with Bryce. And I think now obviously Mac Jones emerged into something that surprised the overwhelming majority of us. But when I look at the quarterback landscape, if I'm just talking about a Devy draft, and I've never drafted a quarterback in a Devy draft personally, that's another thing that I just have never done. And Campus to Canton I will, but not pure Devy. Okay, so if you're looking at those are the 4 guys that I can feel really confident, hey, they have franchise potential. Rattler, Howell, again, DJ, and Bryce. So beyond that, the numbers show us that more guys than that, due to scarcity at the position and demand.
And I believe you guys have those 3 in one tier and Bryce in a single, if I remember that correctly.
We gave Young his own tier because we wanted to say,
right.
He's the best of the rest, but we're not. I need to see a little more. And my guess is he will ascend to there. So if you're listening to this and you're looking at this, I would have no problem taking Young amongst that. That was maybe splitting hairs a little bit, but we also kind of liked that line of demarcation for them. But I would say that if I'm looking at other guys that really have potential, I mean, I'm really thinking, for me, if I'm betting on it, it's a group of two, and it's actually Matt Corral and it's JT Daniels for me. And I think that there's plenty of flaws with both guys. There's plenty of flaws with everybody, you know, but I think in terms of those would be the 6 guys I'd find myself most willing to bet on. Now, I could speculatively make a bet on a few other guys, but in terms of just a Devy draft, those would be the 6 guys that would comprise any guys that I would truly personally consider drafting in that format. Now, we already touched on some of the other guys that I think could ascend. We touched on Keaton Slovis for a minute. I'll be frank on my opinion of him. I don't think he's an NFL quarterback. If he, and I wrote this down on the show sheet, but we didn't talk about it. I said, you know, if he were drafted in the first round, if he had the opportunity to be a franchise quarterback, if he was a starting quarterback in the NFL, I would have no problem saying he would be the least physically gifted starter in the NFL. I mean, would anyone disagree with that?
Makes Joe Burrow look like Michael Vick,
That's what Austin said the other night. Yeah,
no doubt. I mean, Burrow's an athlete, though. But I mean, so that's not even fair. I mean, I agree with you. Yeah, he does make him look like Mike Vick, but I mean, I just think with Slovis, I mean, I just don't think. I mean, he's had shoulder issues for 2 years running now. His mechanics are so bad that he essentially has gotten dead arm twice in the past 2 years. And I think he's got a pop gun arm. I just don't think he can make any throw that you want to consistently see in the NFL. I think that he popped as a freshman, and that got everyone excited. He plays in an air raid, so he's going to be probably a top 20 college fantasy quarterback. But I personally just don't see a next level for him. And he was another guy that I think we ranked too highly, but we have at least 2 guys, possibly 3, that like him. And so that wasn't up to me, but I just kind of wanted to touch on him as well. I don't see him as a next level guy. I mean, I think he's fine. He's fine to throw to NFL receivers in an air raid at USC where you're going to have a talent edge most games. But I
like Corral also. And I compared him, I think it was in part 1 of that article, to Jameis Winston, and whether or not he is a better or worse prospect than Jameis Winston. I think he has all of the physical tools. I think Zach Wilson is a good comparison there, but he just makes really bad decisions at times. The same way Winston did, but that didn't stop Winston from 1, being a number 1 overall pick, or 2, being a quarterback 1 in NFL fantasy.
It didn't stop the NFL from taking Jordan Love, who led the NCAA in interceptions in the first round. So, I mean, I think at least one franchise, I don't want to say all franchises will look past that, but all it takes is one, you know? And I mean, I think in terms of giftedness.
And he's got the arm strength and the arm talent for a franchise to fall in love with.
At the high school in the opening, he threw a ball 77 yards. He won the long throw contest. He's got a howitzer for an arm. And so, I mean, and he runs well. He's at a program where they've had scouts there. All these guys are watching Elijah Moore now, and they're going, wait, what's this quarterback? This guy's got some goods. Oh, he was a 4-star. Oh, Lane Kiffin. Okay, let's dig in a little bit. And that's what I mean more about the helmets, I guess, to put a prettier bow on that. Sometimes it does help to scout the helmets, because the reality is all 32 teams are looking at Elijah Moore right now, and then they're looking at the guy throwing in the ball, and that matters. The disadvantage for guys like Carson Strong and Jake Haener have relative to those is nobody's watching anybody on their team right now, and so it's going to take consistent massive seasons to really get noticed, unless it's a Jordan Love type thing. But that I mean, to me, that was I don't know what happened there. That was insanity.
Kyle, I want to thank you for having you on, man. We have to do this again. I hope that you enjoyed yourself.
We did.
I hope that you will come on with us, as we get closer to the fall. We just started this podcast in November, and, it feels like people are really responding well to it, and they're going to respond well to this.
Yeah.
So
I'm just really glad to be on. So yeah, I'll have to check it out. I do so much football that I don't really listen to fantasy football podcasts that much. I'll just nerd out and listen to science podcasts. I like all sorts of weird stuff. I'm a weird dude, but I'll be sure to check you guys out, and I'd love to come back and do it again. I have enjoyed talking with all you guys, and truly do hope that everything takes off. If you guys ever have any questions about what we did well, launching a site, what we would do differently, I'm happy, and I can speak for the team and say, we're happy to lend any potential wisdom we have from that standpoint.
I appreciate it.
All,
us three and the other three for the Campus to Canton team. We appreciate that offer also. So
Sure thing.
All right, man. We'll catch you later. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Later.
All right.
Great night.
Good night, guys.
Oh man.